All right. Everybody's here. Yes, okay. Counselor Hill, would you read us out of closed session, please?
Yes. I move the city council members certify by recorded vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
Second.
Ms. Thomas?
Mayor Walker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGill?
Yes.
Councillor Hill?
Yes.
Councillor Payne?
Yes.
Councillor Snook?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So I call our regular city council meeting to order. We will take a brief moment of silence. All right, thank you. Ms. Thomas, would you do roll call, please?
Mayor Walker?
Present.
Vice Mayor McGill?
Present.
Councillor Hill?
I'm here. Sorry, my space bar button was already.
Councillor Payne?
Here.
Councillor Snook?
Here.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Thomas?
Mayor Walker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGill?
Yes.
Councillor Hill?
Yes.
Councillor Payne?
Yes.
Councillor Snook?
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any announcements, councilors? No. All right. Any items for recognition? No. All right. We're at the consent agenda. Ms. Thomas, would you read the consent agenda, please?
Consent agenda 1, minutes, May 17 work session and regular meeting, May 26 school reconfiguration work session, June 7th closed and regular meetings, June 22nd monthly work session, June 23rd special and closed meetings, June 24th special and closed meetings, July 7th special meeting, July 10th emergency special meeting. 2, resolution appropriating funds for COVID homelessness emergency response program, grant amendment, $201,120, second reading. 3, resolution appropriating funds for Charlottesville Student Victim Outreach Program, Department of Criminal Justice Services Victim of Crimes Act grant, $343,371, second reading. 4, resolution appropriating funds for Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs grant for Charlottesville Albemarle Family Treatment Court Program, expanded services, $827,973, second reading. 5, resolution appropriating funds for the FY21 Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services body-worn camera grant, $100,000, second reading. 6, resolution appropriating fiscal year 2021 supplemental federal funding for transit capital and operating assistance, $5,038,344, second reading. 7, resolution appropriating funds for city school bus driver incentive plan, $332,952, second reading. 8, resolution appropriating funds for transit bus driver benefits incentive plan, $499,632, second reading. 9, resolution appropriating funds for the Virginia Department of Education Special Nutrition Program Summer Food Service Program, $200,000, first of 2 readings. 10, resolution appropriating funds for Virginia Housing Solutions Program Grant Award, $539,333, first of two readings. 11, resolution appropriating funds for Family First Prevention Services Act for the Department of Social Services Family Services Staffing, $164,607, first of two readings. 12, resolution appropriating previously approved funds to the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society for the purpose of identifying the individuals interred in the unmarked graves at Penn Park and their descendants, $2,500, first of two readings. 13, resolution appropriating previously approved funds for a match of a Virginia Department of Historic Resources 2021 through 2022 State Survey and Planning Cost Share Program grant for Phase 1 of the Charlottesville Downtown Mall Historic Landscape Study and Management Plan, $10,000, first of two readings. 14, resolution amending and reauthorizing the Charlottesville Public School Scholarship Fund, one reading.
All right, thank you. Councilors, are there any questions this time? No? All right, Mr. Wheeler, I'll turn it over to you to see if we have anyone who would like to make public comment on an item on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Walker. If you'd like to address council, please click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar. If you're on via telephone, you can press *9. Each person will get up to 3 minutes. And again, this is just for items on the consent agenda. We have a telephone caller. If you could introduce yourself, tell us your full name and where you're calling from. And you'll have to unmute your microphone. This is for the phone number ending in 78. Can you hear us? And can you unmute? All right, we'll come back to that person. Next up is Morgan Smith. Morgan, you're on with council and you've got 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening, excuse me, council. My name is Morgan Smith. I am a resident at 1025 Cottonwood Road. And I just want to quickly and briefly come to you with a item of concern, not necessarily, but just to see if we could solicit some help from the city. I'm a graduate of Charlottesville High School, year 2002. I was a member of the undefeated state championship team in 2001. And that was not recognized at all within the city of Charlottesville. Yes.
Hi, so this is public comment is just for any item that's on the consent agenda that was just read by the clerk. There will
my apologies.
2 opportunities later to speak on other public comment matters.
Okay, my apologies.
And we'll try again with the telephone caller on the number ending in 78. If you could unmute. And that person's not responding. Okay. Mayor Walker, I don't see any other hands raised.
All right, thank you. All right, councilors, are there any questions or comments? Okay, I just have some, and I made these comments before. I just, for item resolution 7, I just want to make sure that we are prioritizing figuring out, bonus or incentives for other city employees. Also, for item number 8, and this applies to 7 too, I know we have the health insurance benefits, but we know that retirement benefits are a big portion of this. So I hope that's something that's being looked at for future modifications for both school bus and transit drivers and other city employees to make sure that we factor that in. In terms of item 12, and I sent an email earlier to Mr. Warner about this. I'm not sure how the partnership with AC, the Historical Society, ACHS, is going to, and that article that the intern will write will produce the desired results, but I will remain optimistic that that is what will happen. I'm just not sure those individuals, and maybe something has changed that has just not been communicated, but that the individuals that we're seeking is reading that publication. So I'm interested in just a little, more of how that process is going to be fleshed out, and what exactly the 2,500 other than the article it's going to produce. And then in terms of number 11, does this automatically equate to the downtown area being considered an historic site? And then what is the public engagement process if that is determined to be a next step? And maybe I didn't understand the report enough, but it seemed like that designation could be something we may be striving for in the future. And I just want to make sure that other citizens other than who may be just on the downtown mall is included in that public engagement piece and understands what that designation means.
You're talking about the historic landscape study?
Yes.
Okay, I think my numbers look different. Okay. I do see that Mr. Werner is on. Do we want him to chime in on those items?
Well, I want to answer publicly. I have the answer for that, but I just want
okay.
But if you want to share with us your thoughts on either one, then that's fine.
Sorry, I'm getting, if you're asking me, I'm sorry, Mayor, you were asking me to repeat or?
Well, Counselor Hill just asked you if I wanted you to chime in. I said I emailed you earlier. I was just stating it for the record, but if you want to comment on either one of those, that's fine.
No, and I appreciate you asking that question. I realize I probably, hadn't, there's so many pieces and parts, but I could just best say it is, this is a mystery that I have some extraordinary people helping us kind of unravel, in Dr. Shelley Murphy and Sam Towler and some others. And the first step and when we spoke last November about Penn Park, your instructions were, before we start talking about memorializing that site, let's understand what possibly the descendant community would want. And we agree with that. And then we say, all right, well, who are the folks that we need to be talking to? And as you know, Dr. Murphy's been involved with the university's work in researching the folks that work at the university and slave population there. And so it's been fascinating, some of the things that have crossed over and things that Mr. Towler's brought to the table. But it really is, we're talking 150, 200 years in the past, and trying to identify individuals and identify them with full names that then allow the genealogists to take that forward and identify individuals that we could reach out to. So it's been, I wish I could have shared with you all of the attachments that I think I noted. I haven't even been able to go through them all, but it is volumes. But we are beginning to create a list of who those individuals likely were, and then to then take that list and begin to contact descendants. And the work on the side with the Historical Society, they are working on an article, and they have an intern who's kind of helping to catalog and inventory all this information that's being done. So an article is a piece of this, but the greater objective is who are these individuals, and do they have families still that we can contact? So that's where that is. And I mean, to have someone like Shelley Murphy and Sam Towler, that caliber of expertise helping us out, it's actually, I think this is a pretty good deal for the city. So.
And in terms of the intern selection, are they a part of that process too?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The intern who will be selected, are they a part of that process too?
Well, we don't know, and we're talking about Penn Park, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't know who they are, and we've got some good leads, and it's interesting some of the, but we don't know who they are yet. We have until we sort of can say, all right, it's kind of genealogy backwards instead of starting with yourself and working back in time. We're finding individuals and being able to kind of piece together, all right, here's who they were. Do they have a family tree that we can trace into the present day, and then to reach out to those individuals? So I have not yet reached out to anyone, and hoping as things progress over the summer, we'll have something to report back to you on that.
Yeah. My question was the intern that will be selected for this phase of the project. I'm assuming that Ms. Murphy, she'll have some input on who that person is.
So the intern is it's an individual, it's a young woman that actually contacted me last summer, university student, was very interested in this topic, and we were talking, and I said the city does not have an internship available, and I had suggested she talk with the historical society, so sort of things came together, and so she is there, kind of, sort of putting together for something that can be presented in an article. But I said this is a tremendous amount of information, and she's already starting to kind of just pull it together. On we're even discussing like should be index cards. I mean, it's one of those, you need a giant room with a chalkboard to keep track of all these folks. But that will be her job. This is just a fraction of what I think the Historical Society is contributing to her internship into this effort. So this is just to sort of to help them help me.
Okay. All right. And
on the mall, I will get to the point where, the downtown mall is already historically designated. This is something that started. It predates when I came to the city 3.5 years ago, or at least employing with the city. But it is to look at the mall itself, the design space that is the Halpern design, and so there's several steps along the way. And yes, the community will be very involved as that goes forward. This initial phase is more of a documentary research, but the next steps will be very heavy with stakeholder involvement.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
I do have one clarifying thing that I've been asked about. When we talk about the resolution for the benefits plan, that does include transportation drivers as well as our city bus drivers, is my understanding. And Mr. Boyles, correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm sorry, something muffled you with one of the driver descriptions.
So around the benefits incentive plan, that's not just for city, CAT drivers, it's also for pupil transportation.
Yes, both. We're doing both school bus pupil and CAT transit drivers.
Just wanted to clarify that because that question was asked. Thank you.
You are talking about the benefits?
Yes.
Yes.
But it's specifically related to health insurance, right? It's not the benefits.
Yes, it's the health insurance.
Yeah, so that was my comment.
Yes.
All right. And I guess we will go, and I do have a question about the scholarship fund. I didn't know if, but we can check with the caller to see if they can speak now, and then we'll come back to that, if that's helpful.
Mayor Walker, you're referring to the person who has their hand raised?
The 882 number, yeah.
Okay. We can try that again. If you're on via telephone and you'd like to address council, please unmute your microphone and tell us your full name.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. You've got 3 minutes.
My name is Matthew Ray. I'm a 51-year resident of the city of Charlottesville and also a CAT employee. I was calling in today in support of a transit union that I believe that would greatly benefit us as CAT drivers. As you know, CAT is called upon to do many things. We have been there for most every weather condition that we've had. We've stayed on the road.
Mr. Ray?
Most of our, yes.
So there'll be, you are on our public comment section for
Yes.
just coming up shortly. So you'll have an opportunity. This was specifically related to the items that were on the consent agenda.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Snook, did you want to comment on the resolution for the amending or reauthorizing the Charlottesville Scholarship Fund?
Sure. Basically what happened was some years ago, and I'm not frankly sure when, members of the scholarship committee extended the benefit not only to CHS students, but also to city employees and to school board employees, though that was not actually authorized by the resolution that had created the scholarship fund in the first place. And so when CACF took over as our agent, and they looked at all of the documents, they said, "Hey, wait a minute, you're not actually authorized to do that." So this is an effort to get the authority equal to that which has been happening for the last few years anyway. And essentially in this case, the specific issue is to be able to offer scholarship funds to city and to city school employees to go to PVCC to take a class of some sort to improve their situation. And that was really the main purpose of it all. And as we talked about how we could best do that, the easiest way was simply to make the change that was suggested in the resolution to basically give the committee the authority to make whatever other changes may be necessary or appropriate, and recognizing, of course, that there's a city councilor on the committee, so there would not be a disconnect between council's wishes and the scholarship committee.
And I had one question in terms of prioritizing. Do you all prioritize a certain percentage towards youth or adults, or is it just based on the applications that you all receive?
To be honest, this particular year, I don't think we had any specific requests, but the idea was we were going to fund a certain number of students. And if there are other people, other staff who said they wanted to participate as well, wanted a subsidy of some sort for scholarship, then we would consider those. We have not had the situation where we've said, "Oh, gee, we can't afford to do what we were expecting to do with the students because we were doing something with the staff." The reality is that we've done pretty well on our investments. The endowment is doing well. And so we are able to continue to expand the services available and the scholarships available. So it's really not a matter of trading off one against the other at this point.
Thank you. Okay. So any counselors, any questions? All right. Is there a motion?
I'd move the approval of the consent agenda.
Ms. Thomas?
That was Heather, second.
Mayor Walker,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGill,
Yes.
Councilor Hill,
Yes.
Councilor Payne,
Yes.
Councilor Snook,
Yes.
Okay. That carries 5-0. Next up, we have the city manager response to community matters and to counselors. Mr. Bulls, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Walker. Just a few quick things. Just a very big thank you to you, the city council, our city staff, and especially our community for what turned out to be a very successful statue relocation this past week and prior weekend. Things went much quicker and very quieter than we had anticipated, but it's always better to over-prepare and not need it. And but just a very, very big thank you, because a lot of people throughout the city staff and the community contributed to making that happen. Staff has continued to work, and we will update you as we progress on getting the final resting places for those 3 statues. We'll be prioritizing the Sacagawea, Lewis, and Clark statue first. And then as that comes to a wind, we find a location for that. Then we will continue to work with the 2 Confederate statues. But a very big thank you to everybody on that. At a previous council meeting, it was requested that staff look at trying to find a bathroom solution on the downtown mall. We continue to work on that, quite a challenging task, as I know it's been worked on for many years and been worked on in a lot of other communities. But we continue to work with a couple of business groups on that. And we are beginning to have some ideas with some opportunities that have arisen there. Would like to try to update council on filling our open positions. It was a very busy week last week with interviews. We had some final interviews with the Police Civilian Review Board, and also on Friday, final interviews for Director of Neighborhood Development Services. We're getting much closer with those 2. Unfortunately, we will be, and it began today, advertising for the Human Resources Director position again. But with those, the more promising news that we have, and I would like to take the opportunity now to introduce Samuel Sanders, who is our new Deputy City Manager for Operations. If I could ask Sam just to pull his camera on for a second. Sam started last Monday, so he's just over a week with us. I'm trying to figure out how he started on the Monday after we had such a busy weekend, but we'll figure that out later. But we're very, very happy to have Sam on board. He's covering a lot of different departments that include NDS, utilities, public works, parks and rec, and a few others that we haven't assigned to him yet, but I'm sure we'll get to. But Sam, we're very, very happy to have you on board. Sam comes to us from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where he has served a number of years with a neighborhood development corporation in mid-city of Baton Rouge. Just the mid-city neighborhood is nearly the size of the city of Charlottesville. It's over 35,000 people. So very happy to have Sam with us. We're also very happy to be able to report that we've been monitoring the Midway Manor elevator status, and we were notified last week that they do have both elevators working. I haven't heard anything lately, so I'm hoping they're both still working. But for the first time in a very long time, they do have that. But we are continuing to try to work with the residents. There's still a few other resident-type services that do need to be addressed there. Just to let you know, after a fairly long hiatus, we have re-engaged our quarterly neighborhood association meetings with the city manager's office and several department heads. So we held our second one of those on July the 15th. A reminder to council that July 27th, we do have a council workshop, and we'll be focusing there on the budget schedule for FY23, and we will also present to you a draft for a 2-phase strategic planning process. An initial phase that will get us into fiscal year 23, and then a bigger version that will cover fiscal year 24 through 26. Both of these, both the 1 year and the 3 year, will be include community engagement for the entire community. It will cover work with city staff and, of course, work with the city council. So we'll do that along with presenting you a proposed schedule for the FY23 budget process. We also will be presenting to you probably at your next council meeting a proposed schedule for the American Rescue Plan funding as we get closer to knowing what our reserve needs will be as our audit becomes a little bit clearer. Of course, we finished the fiscal year on June 30th, and we're starting to get better understanding of what these funds can and cannot be used for. We'll present that to you, and that plan will be for over a year, because we will not be presenting to you anything that would commit us to funding until we actually receive our second round of the ARP funds. We'll present something to you for the first round, which is half of the funds, but we don't want to commit that second round until we actually know that we will be receiving those. With that, that's my whole report. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions? And welcome, Mr. Sanders.
I just want to say welcome and also just echo the thanks, Mr. Boyles, and to staff and to all the community partners that were part of just the removal of the statues. It was just an incredible effort, and just really appreciate the tremendous lift, unintended.
I don't think it could have gone smoother. Thank you. I know it was a ton of work. No, that pun wasn't intended, but thank you and welcome, Sam. I look forward to getting to know you better.
And I wholeheartedly agree with the thanks and the praise for the efforts in removing the statues so professionally, and also agree that welcome, Sam. Thanks.
Okay. Any other? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that update. Next up, we have the community matters. I'll turn it over to Mr. Wheeler. It looks like we have 8 people pre-registered, one of those numbers, and we'll call on other after the registration. I think we have 8, correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Mayor Walker. We have 8 people who signed up in advance. We'll call on them first. If you'd like to get in line, please click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar. If you're on via telephone, you can press star 9. And Mr. Ray, you can go ahead and raise your hand again as well, because you were one of the ones who was signed up. You'll be number 8. And Thom Richmond, you'll be number 7. You were on the waiting list and you got moved up. But our first speaker tonight is Peter Krebs. Peter, you're on with council and you've got 3 minutes.
Good evening, council, staff, and community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Peter Krebs. I work for the Piedmont Environmental Council, and I live on Tufton Avenue here in the city. Tonight's agenda contains 2 items that fund really 3 important bicycle pedestrian transportation priorities. The Transportation Alternative Grant for Meadow Creek Connector will allow people to walk or bike or move calmly and safely along a streamside trail from Mickey Drive to Greenbrier Drive and Greenbrier Park. That'll allow kids who live in Mickey Drive, for example, to walk to school at Greenbrier. It'll open numerous connections to help people reach work or shopping along the 29 corridor. And it'll extend the process that we're working on along 250, the John Warner Parkway, to connect the core of the combined Charlottesville-Albemarle urban area. The TAP grant also supports the Safe Routes to School programming coordinator position. I simply can't say enough about Safe Routes. And I think it's really, that program and Kyle as well have really shown their value to a greater degree than ever before, now that we're looking at school buses in new ways. So I'm excited about that. I also hope you will approve the Fontaine streetscape, which will dramatically improve movement along a key artery for everyone and make it much safer for walking and biking. All three of these projects embody, and the Fontaine piece in particular, something that I harp on all the time, which is picking up shared wins for Charlottesville, Albemarle, and the university, and fostering collaboration, active collaboration. They're very community-focused projects. They focus on the vulnerable. They embody lots of community engagement. They're examples of staff identifying small investments that can bring much, much larger investments from outside. So very smart way to work. Most importantly, they'll help residents live healthier, less stressful lives, reduce our carbon footprint, and create a safer and more sustainable and equitable transportation system. Thank you all for your great work, and that extends to the many people out in the community in trenches doing different kinds of work. Deep respect to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor Walker, our second speaker was to be Morgan Smith, who I know was on earlier, and I believe wanted to highlight the Charlottesville girls basketball team, but we'll see if she returns to the call. Next up is Julia Whiting. Julia, you're on with council, and you've got 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm a city resident. In 2012, I was at a number of city council meetings about another matter when I observed the process for a special use permit for a proposed new large apartment building on Main Street. Much of the discussion then centered on general appearance and business use, but there was some discussion about affordability. Many residents at that time commented about citizens being displaced and the neighborhood being disrupted, and their comments reflected despair that the money interests had already determined the outcome. Over 2 weeks ago, my husband wrote to City Hall to find out the agreed upon details of that 2012 permit and ultimately how many units were produced despite the agreement. He still has not gotten the data and was told there is no central city database for this information. And due to that and high staff turnover, he might need to file a Freedom of Information Act to obtain it. I ask council to quickly make this information available as a timely matter of public discussion, rather than requiring citizens to ask for and pay for this information. I think the information should be provided for at least the last 20 years of development. I'd also like to ask a few more questions of council. How will the proposed changes shown on the future land use map bring about affordable housing? By flooding the market with a general increase in housing units, or just the designated affordable units? Is the goal to have more rental units or owner-occupied condos? How will affordability be defined? Is the goal to create affordability for a larger number of below median income working people, or a small number of severely impoverished with an income of 10 to 15% of area median income, such as the disabled or elderly? How will the city avoid repeating another episode of what happened in Belmont with the new dense commercial district causing distress to longtime homeowners next door? Is the council aware that 10 out of the 15 units on 10th Street near Dairy Market are already owned by developers, and that homeowners are getting cold calls from real estate agents in neighborhoods with high development pressure, especially near UVA? Finally, neighborhood nodes with retail and commercial space do not increase housing density. Retail and commercial space is in gross oversupply in the city. If a neighborhood is strongly unified against retail or other commercial enterprises, will there be a process where the mixed use designation can be reverted to residential only in any particular neighborhood? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is John Earl, who will be followed by Emily Yen. John, you're on with council, and you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is John Earl. I live at 313 Huntley Avenue in Charlottesville, and I'm a collective bargaining administrator with the Amalgamated Transit Union. The ATU is the largest union representing bus operators and other transit employees throughout North America. I want to thank you for this opportunity to address this body on what's a very important issue for the hardworking public servants in our community. First, I want to applaud this body also for having the courage to finally see through the removal of the Confederate statues in our great city. They were a vulgar expression of racism and a reminder that the Confederacy had not truly died. However, statues are not the final holdover of the Jim Crow South, because we still have policies on the books that disproportionately disenfranchise people of color. Tonight, I'd like to talk specifically about the absence of any provision for collective bargaining for public sector employees in our city. Article 23 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a guidepost for human rights throughout the world, provides that it's a basic human right for workers to be able to form and join labor unions to advocate for their interests. For generations, however, municipal employees like the transit operators, who are predominantly people of color, have been deprived the right to form a union and collectively bargain for better wages and conditions of employment. Moreover, the anti-union laws that are on the books now are rooted in a legacy of racism. Virginia's past segregationist governor, William Tuck, the same governor who encouraged massive resistance to school desegregation and the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education decision. He was the guy who also passed Virginia's anti-union right to work law, and he cemented some of the nation's most aggressively anti-union laws. These laws weakened and defunded unions in the state and ensured that unions, which are a critical vector of social uplift, would be mollified. He and others like him were allied with Vance Muse, a segregationist and anti-Semite who was the founder of these anti-union so-called right-to-work laws. His organization, the so-called Christian American Association, long opposed unions because they recognized that unions had the potential to unite workers of all races. And Muse employed ugly anti-Black rhetoric when he opposed unions. He said that if there are unions, and I quote, "White women and white men will be forced into organizations with Black African apes whom they will have to call brother or lose their jobs," end quote. And if there was any question about whether unions and racial justice were intrinsically intertwined, Dr. King himself had this to say in 1961. "The labor hater and the labor baiter is virtually always a twin-headed creature spewing anti-Negro epithets from one mouth and anti-labor propaganda from the other mouth. In sum, the absence of core union rights in our Commonwealth can best be understood as a monument to racism that, just like the heinous statues lionizing the slavocracy, must be dismantled. We have an opportunity now to pass a strong public sector collective bargaining ordinance that will allow city workers the right to form unions, and I implore City Council to take the opportunity. Tonight, you'll hear from Matthew Ray, a longtime bus operator. He and his colleagues are already working to organize, and we've already signed up a quarter of the workforce to join our union. And we implore City Council to do the right thing, seize this opportunity to undo the tragic legacy of anti-union laws, and help give these employees the fundamental human right to be able to form a union and bargain collectively. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Emily Yen, who will be followed by Philip Harway. Emily, you're on with council and you've got 3 minutes.
Hello, I am Dr. Emily Yen. I'm a Charlottesville City resident who lives on 506 Ridge Street. I am speaking in support of a collective bargaining ordinance for municipal public sector workers here in Charlottesville. There's a long history of racial injustice in Charlottesville, and it's unfortunately part of our everyday reality. According to the 2019 data from the American Community Survey, the median household income for non-Hispanic white residents in the city of Charlottesville is $71,317. And for Black residents, $36,000 and $122 for Blacks households. This is a $35,195 income gap. This is absolutely atrocious. It's a reflection of the racial inequity that exists in our community. While there has been steps taken since the Unite the Right rally, this material difference is really a reflection of the work that needs to be done. It's imperative that we address collective bargaining writes, how we treat our workers in our own city, in our own backyards, is a reflection of our community values. The best way to treat our workers with dignity and respect and start to close this racial income gap is to grant collective bargaining rights to our own employees. I urge you to pass a strong collective bargaining ordinance similar to the one passed in Loudoun County, Virginia, as soon as possible in order to start to ameliorate this injustice. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Philip Haraway, who will be followed by Thom Richmond. Philip, you're on with council, and you've got 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you. My name is Philip Haraway, and my wife and I live at 707 Alta Vista Avenue here in the city. Mayor Walker and members of the council, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I previously was able to express myself at the last council meeting on the future land use map under the public time, so I'll be brief. I do want to address the plan that was presented to the Planning Commission at their last meeting by the Housing Advisory Committee. At the end of that last Planning Commission meeting, the Housing Advisory Committee presented alternative future land use maps. Like them, I'm most concerned that the plans presently being developed and presented by the outside consulting company will not result in many of the goals set out. The Housing Advisory Committee presented these alternate plans for upzoning, but they are tied in most cases to confirmed affordable housing, not just upzoning and letting the market do its magic. Those terms, affordable housing, still need to be defined, but at the very least, the Housing Alliance's plans appear to have targetable goals with their proposals that the consultants' maps leave open to eventual and future decisions. I understand that the heavy lifting comes next when the zoning and eventually the city council makes the final decisions. But let's not start down the road now by just saying affordability will be accomplished later. It doesn't seem to have worked in the past, so we must do better this time. I urge you to get behind the Housing Advisory Committee alternate plans in whatever way you can as this gets developed. And thank you for taking care of some serious problems here in the city. And I also would like to commend the removal of the Confederate statues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Thom Richmond, who will be followed by Matthew Ray. Thom, you're on with City Council. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Thom Richmond, and I actually live in Lexington at 106 Liberty Hall in Lexington, Virginia. So I'm south of you guys. I'm the president of CalTri Events. CalTri Events is a Virginia-based 501c3 nonprofit with a mission of being safe, affordable, and accessible. And we're a national triathlon series. Typically, athletes and their cheering sections representing 20 to 25 states visit our host cities for each of our races. At one of our most recent races, athletes raised $250,000 for Special Olympics and Crohn's and colitis. This year, there are 5 races scheduled in Albemarle and Fluvanna counties. On May 2nd, thanks to the support of Lake Monticello, Fluvanna, and Albemarle counties, we produced a sold-out, socially distanced race, which by all accounts was a complete success. In 2021, there were 2 races that require a City of Charlottesville special events permit, as the swim and staging area is at Fry Spring Beach Club. One was on June 27, and the other will be on September 26th. For the June 27 race, the city's policy read, quote, due to the potential spread of COVID-19 and its threat to public health and safety, the City of Charlottesville is not accepting any applications or issuing any special event permits until further notice, end quote. We were forced to choose between disappointing athletes again in 2021 or producing the June 27th race with limited numbers at a substantial loss. As a commitment to our community of athletes, we chose the latter. Compare the austere nature of the City of Charlottesville special events policy against the one governing events such as Fridays after 5, which began on June 18. I want to quote Carly Haynes of CBS 9 News, who interviewed the general manager of the Nook on the downtown mall in a July 5th piece. Quote, on any given Friday, you probably see 1,000 people walk by. It's wonderful. The return of the music, the return of the crowds, the smiles, getting to see everyone's face. It's great. Frankly, our community was confused how a large gathering where food and beverages were served and social distancing wasn't being observed was not a threat to public safety, public health and safety, but permitting our triathlon, which includes swimming at Fry Spring, biking along Lynchburg Road, and running along Stribling Avenue, was considered a threat to public health and safety. On June 30th, we messaged the entire city council and did get a prompt reply the next day from Mr. Boyles. The response was, the Fridays After 5 event is held by a private entity who formally leases the pavilion space from the city and not subject to special event permitting for public parks and streets, end quote. We view that as a difference without a distinction. Certainly, the city of Charlottesville should be consistent with respect to potential threats to public safety. We encourage them to do so moving forward. And as a follow-up, I know my time's done. Earlier today, it looks like the special events process actually opened up, and we did put in a permit for September 26th. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up is Matthew Ray. Matthew, you're back on with council. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name, as you know, is Matthew Ray. I'm a 51-year resident of Charlottesville. I live on 930 Fifth Street. I'm also a 7.5-year employee at Charlottesville Area Transit. And first things I want to say is commend our Director Garland, for his magnificent job of keeping us safe and healthy through the coronavirus. What I also wanted to state was how we at Transit, I guess, the fact that how we are perceived or maybe what we do. We have worked through the entire transit effort here. We've had several drivers get sick. We've been here with the major snowstorms. We were there on August 11th and August 12th. We were on the road. We've also filled in for a school bus and kept them running. The need for the transit union as representation, I think, is something that is long overdue for us. A lot of us and a lot of our guys feel they're underpaid, and maybe, we've kind of been through a lot of change and turmoil lately. And we think that representation with the transit union would be good for our sector of what we do. I would like to share that living in Charlottesville is difficult with the housing and everything else. Most of our operators do not live in Charlottesville, so that makes it difficult when you do have inclement weather and things like that to get into town and to come to work. But we do it. So I would just like to say that being in the union and having representation with the union would probably be a good thing for us and for the city, and for us to advance on in what we do for the city. I am prideful to be a part of this city and prideful to be a CAT employee. So I want to continue with the union activities if possible. I would like for you guys to consider the collective bargaining agreement if we can reach it. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mayor Walker, Morgan Smith did not return to the webinar, so I'll move on to the next group that has their hands raised, which I think includes everyone that was on the waiting list. First up will be Kathleen Glenn Matthews, who will be followed by Katrina Turner. Kathleen, you're on with council. You've got 3 minutes.
Great. Can you hear me?
We can.
Hello, my name's Kathleen Glenn Matthews. I'm a resident of the city of Charlottesville and also the Deputy Executive Director of Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority. I wanted to join tonight to thank Mr. Williams, the Director of CAT, Mr. Boyles, Ms. Walker, the Mayor, and city staff for all their help and support in our moments of need over the past couple of weeks as we've had to relocate our elderly and disabled community members at Crescent Halls. We are very grateful for your support, and we wanted to send a very sincere thank you.
Thank you. Was she done, or did that stop abruptly for some other reason?
Oh, no, I was finished.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Katherine Turner. Katrina, you're on with council. You've got 3 minutes.
Katherine Turner. I'm calling, I want to speak to Mr. Boyles. A couple of city councils ago, I asked some questions about Chief Brackney and about former Chief Thomas getting rid of the records in 2016 and needing to know how Chief Brackney actually reviewed my case if Chief Thomas got rid of those records before he left. In a letter from Chief Brackney on September 26, 2018, Chief Brackney accused me of accusing an officer of lying in court. That never happened. I've asked to speak to someone about all these decision letters that I have gotten, okay? And what she said that I accused an officer of was injuring my son with keys. On the deposition letter in 2016, it states, with regards to the keys striking Mr. Porter in the head, all evidence leads to a conclusion that it was accidental and occurred while the officers were struggling to take him into custody. Nothing about an injury. So I need to know where she got that I accused an officer of an injury to my son. Okay, not just that, where she states that in the decision letter, it states that there is clear evidence from every person on the scene, including you, that your son was not only being uncooperative, but physically interfering with the officer's ability to do so their job. My son was handcuffed behind his back from the time he was in his apartment until the time they slammed him against the wall, against the police car and everything. So I'd like to know what did she look at in order to say that she reviewed this case? I need to know if those records were gotten rid of by Chief Thomas, because I have a recording from Chief Thomas that states those records will always be there whenever I need them. I've been trying to get these records for over 5 years. I need to know the truth. The officers in this case lied, and I'm saying it now. And if I'm slandering the police department, then make them come after me. But I need answers in this case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Walker, a brief announcement. My team tells me we may have a brief interruption in the broadcast. That it will not impact the webinar. So if you're watching on one of our channels, please know we're going to restore the broadcast as quickly as possible. And if you're on the webinar, hang with us. Ms. Turner was our 9th speaker. Next up is Mark Cavett, who will be followed by Courtney Kakacian. Mark, you're on with council, and you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening. Mark Cabot, 400 Altamont Street. Let me first say that I have many issues with the comprehensive plan as presented. I have only 3 minutes, but I need 2 hours. First issue that we need to address with the community is how dense do we want the city to become? Do we have the infrastructure to support high density? Where should new schools be built? Who do you see living in the new units to be built? I don't believe that there'll be people looking for affordable housing. There's a movement nationwide for people to live in urban areas, especially like Charlottesville. Demand for housing is going to remain strong for some time. We're not going to build our way out of that demand. When I compare rent to other similar cities such as Chapel Hill and even large cities such as Detroit, I notice that our current rates are in line with other cities. When comparing new construction in the urban core, you do not see rent decrease until you get away from the urban core and look at older housing. I have data on this, and I'll be presenting it to you all within the next few days by email, and also a package that's being put together by myself and several other people. This brings me to a Tauntaun presentation with 3 out-of-state experts in the field of affordability about 3 years ago. The bottom line for the program is that you're not going to achieve affordable housing with new construction. New construction is inherently expensive. You're not going to achieve affordable housing with that new construction unless you have public money. It would be better to spend money to repair existing housing or adding on to single-family homes. And I know that we have a program that does help people who cannot afford to repair their homes. The average new construction apartment is renting for about $1,500 a month. To afford that apartment, a person would need to make about $30 an hour. If you got lucky and you got a unit that had been designated as an affordable unit, you need to be making at least $22.50 an hour. What are we going to do for the person that needs housing making $12 to $15 an hour? I'm working on a cost of new apartment rentals in our area. We'll have that information at a future council meeting. In future, I, as I said, and others are going to be making some recommendations on how this comprehensive plan should be adjusted. There are ways to achieve density and more affordable housing. This plan, as submitted, will not achieve the desired results. What we need in this area, what we have in this area, is an income disparity issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Courtney Caucasian, who will be followed by Nancy Carpenter. Courtney, you're on with council, and you've got 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Walker and council. Thank you for hearing my comments this evening. I'm Courtney Caucasian, Executive Director of the Charlottesville-Albemarle Convention and Visitors Bureau, a jointly funded organization by the city and the county to promote overnight stays amongst other tourism-related support. The CACVB's mission is to enhance the economic prosperity of the city and the county by promoting, selling, and marketing the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County as a destination. Visitors to the city of Charlottesville bolster local businesses and attractions, and in 2019 sustained 2,700 jobs, generated more than $277 million in economic impact, and contributed nearly $9 million to the city's budget. COVID hit the tourism industry especially hard. As our industry begins to climb back, it's essential that we invest in promoting the city to have a strong recovery, especially as visitors venture further from home and as our events struggled for return. At the CACVB, we made organization-wide changes to respond to the crisis and mitigate impact, including closing our brick-and-mortar visitor centers and shifting to a mobile visitor center model. However, our budget moving forward is more than 20% cut this upcoming fiscal year and likely 50% down the following. The American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law by President Biden on March 11th, sending $350 billion to governments to address the fiscal impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The ARPA states that funding should be used to aid in relief of hard-hit industries, specifically mentioning travel, tourism, and hospitality as an industry needing assistance. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Virginia localities to alleviate the economic losses sustained through the pandemic. Estimates show that in 2020, the Virginia tourism industry lost $10 billion, the state's lodging industry lost over $3 billion, and Virginia's restaurant industry lost over $1.8 billion. It is estimated that room revenues will not recover until 2023 or 2024, which means lodging accommodations will need our support over the next couple of years. The lodging industry has not received local COVID relief to date, and I humbly ask Council to consider providing grants to this sector for recovery. With the easing of restrictions and pent-up desire to travel, the CACVB wants to welcome visitors back with consistent, compelling messaging for the next 2 years that can only be accomplished with a restored budget. I humbly request Council utilize a portion of the ARPA funding to restore the CACVB's marketing budget for the next 2 fiscal years. Thank you for your time and consideration in supporting the tourism industry, the CACVB, and the return of this strong revenue source for our community. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Nancy Carpenter, who will be followed by Robin Hoffman. Nancy, you're on with council. You've got 3 minutes.
I would call it economic catastrophe because of this pandemic. And unfortunately, the data shows, as I think a lot of other people have talked in other various avenues, that families of color have disproportionately felt the burden of this catastrophe. Earlier this month, I was at a conference call with the Virginia Poverty Law Center, and they were estimating that about 34% of tenant families in Virginia could face possible eviction after the CDC moratorium ends in a couple of weeks. And just as an FYI, there were about 30,500 and some tenant families in the state of Virginia, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition's recently released report, which is called Out of Reach. And they do it this time every year, which is where I'm getting my data. So what we need to do in this community is work really hard to keep families housed, and specifically families, because we have a virus variant out there, which last year people in my age group were the ones that were potentially dying from this virus. Now we have a variant that seems to want to strike younger, mature adults, young adults, and children. And to have children in congregate shelter, to severely eliminated the burdensome documentation that they had to provide for that program. So I hope people will do that. But I'm also looking at courts, the judges who hear these unlawful detainers, the lawyers that are representing landlords or property management groups, property management associations, apartment building associations, medical centers, school systems, and anybody in between, that as best as we can to try and work through the next few months and keeping families housed. Because not only are kids going to be facing that, but there's also a real risk of bullying and taunting for those children that go to school and wear masks, from children who come from families that do not think masking is important. So to have a safe space to come home to, for me, is very tantamount in the next few months. Sorry I went over, and thank you for my time.
Thank you.
And council, hopefully you can hear me. We did have an issue with the broadcast. It looks like we've brought it back, and we apologize to Ms. Carpenter for not including her in the broadcast. Next up is Robin Hoffman. Robin, you're on with council, and you've got 3 minutes.
You're muted.
I'm Robin Hoffman. Can you hear me?
Wait, Robin, just a second.
Oh.
Mr. Miller, we can't hear you. You're muted.
How about now?
Yeah, so right after Nancy Carpenter, you went out on us. Right after you said Nancy Carpenter's name.
And I just wanted to share that we're restarting the broadcast. And Nancy Carpenter's presentation was not broadcast, but it is in the webinar. And so our next speaker is Robin Hoffman. And Robin, you're on with council and you've got 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, officials. For the last 4 years, it's been really, really tough. I mean, you pulled the Band-Aid off, and now we're the happy city again, I think, on the tourist, at least, attraction spot. But what I'm trying to say is that I really want to uplift our communications department, especially working so hard to get everybody on board and connected. And I think it's unprecedented. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why, but it's particularly, I think the staff is amazing. They're very talented. Brian and David Dillahunt are just amazing, that they listen to you and then they get it done. So I want to thank everybody. But also I want to say that I thought I was doing parks as a theme. I have a camera now, so I went out and I went to, what was I going to do? I went to the park to see what everybody was thinking, and I did get very good interviews. And one of the interviews where Chief Brackney said to me, I'm glad we are in a position to support everyone in Charlottesville. And I want to say that that is far from when Mike Signer was mayor in July 2017. And he said to me, the courts are holding back the fact of the permission for people to buy the statue, even though there are buyers. So we have come a long way, but it's only because of the dedication of the staff that's currently here. And if we didn't have representation as Nakia Walker, and you know, from the very onset of speaking on what the issues were, and of course Zion Bryant and Don Gathers and many more. But also I want to say that you know, the education piece with Charlene Green and Jelaine Schmidt and Andrea Douglas, you know, ongoing, the commission, etc. These are all really important issues, but I was hoping that we would all become CPA TV members and then, you know, have this ongoing conversations. I mean, these interviews that I've been doing 73 episodes. And right now I'm with the Botanical Gardens Park, with the Senior Citizens Park, and I'm gonna go to the Parks and Rec next and do the Athletes League. And I think it's just become a place that people are saying to me, you know, hey, TV lady, Mr. Rogers and Julia Childs and that. And now even, you know, talking about me being with the camera, Judge Judy, Mr. Green Jeans, Anthony Bourdain, and now, thank you, Andrea Douglas, I am now a little bit of a Tanya Harding. But I have to say all of this because people are coming forward saying that they want more ways to get to become a member. And we don't, it doesn't seem. Okay, thank you.
And my colleague David Dillahunt says you should be able to hear me now. Is that true? Yes, all right. So speaking of kudos for David, he restored the broadcast after an unforeseen obstacle. So thank you, David. Next up is Jeff Fogel, who will be followed by Rebecca Deeds. Jeff, you're on with council and you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening. I'm speaking as a member of the People's Coalition. I know at some point in history, you will actually have a police civilian review board. What we really want is for all of you to live up to your own rhetoric. Councilors have repeatedly said that what they want is a strong and independent civilian review board. And yet virtually every action taken by the council has been to undermine the strength and independence of that board. And then to listen to Lloyd Snook say what's being presented by the Civilian Review Board to the council is a solution looking for a problem. Now, that's a pretty outrageous statement if he doesn't understand what's going on in this community and the history of this issue. But let me share with you something I don't think you know, which is, what is it like to go before Internal Affairs? Do any of you know? Have any of you reached out to learn what goes on when somebody files a complaint with Internal Affairs, other than to ask Internal Affairs itself? Well, let me tell you that when even they do the right thing, in the case, and now I'm talking about LaQuinn Gilmore, the process is seriously flawed. Let me give it to you quickly. We went there, they wanted to interview LaQuinn. He agreed, we agreed, so long as, and they were going to do it by tape recording, so long as we could have a copy of it. And they said, of course you can have a copy of it. To this date, they won't give me a copy of it. Nobody will give me a copy of it, and nobody has explained why. I've been told that it was under orders of the city attorney, although I never learned that attorneys had the authority to order anybody to do anything. But it's lack of even information about why this was withheld such a simple request. And then we requested to see the video that the police department had, and they wouldn't show it to us. Why not? I still don't get an answer to that. But they did show it. After the proceedings were over and the police department wanted to give its own spin on it, it showed the video, not to the complainant, not to the victim, but to serve their own interests in using their own sort of approach to the problem, including criticizing my client for certain discrepancies about which they had never even asked him. So I tell you, the process is rotten, even when it results in the right decision, as it did in the case of LaQuinn. And then, of course, I went to the city, to our wonderful Commonwealth attorney, and said, look, my client was assaulted. The police department found that he was illegally detained, thrown to the ground, had a serious concussion and a back injury. How come you're not prosecuting? He won't prosecute. But let's remember, of course, he's already prosecuted one police officer, so I guess he feels he doesn't have to prosecute another. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Our 15th speaker will be Rebecca Deeds. City Council has room for one additional speaker. If you'd like to raise your hand, click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar. Rebecca, you're on with Council. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you for the chance to speak. I'm here on behalf of Preservation Piedmont to comment on the proposed land use map, and I live in the city off Carlton Avenue. I want to thank City Council, staff, consultants, and community members who've put such great effort into the land use map. Our organization has been tracking the comprehensive planning process since 2017, and we have some feedback to share regarding the proposed map. First, we are concerned the current plan will create greater displacement of historically marginalized communities in vulnerable neighborhoods like 10th and Page, Fifeville, Star Hill, and Rose Hill due to their proximity to UVA, speculative development, and demolition. We seek clarity from the consultants regarding strategies they will use to protect vulnerable neighborhoods. We worry about widespread demolition of existing, more affordable housing in favor of new developments, resulting in considerable environmental and community degradation. We want to see a plan that will incentivize and promote reuse of existing structures. The plan should address the potential effects of upzoning on cultural and environmental resources, such as the reduction in city tree cover due to new development. Such impacts will contribute to heat islands and reduce shaded streets and sidewalks that encourage walking rather than driving. Currently, the proposed land use map does not reflect how these changes would intersect with the architectural design control and conservation districts that receive review from the Board of Architectural Review. Additionally, the plan does not acknowledge or provide a strategy for state and nationally designated or eligible historic districts that are not locally designated for design review. According to the consultants' estimates, the proposed changes will produce only a small number of affordable housing units. At the November 2020 community meeting, The consultant stated that with the mandatory inclusionary zoning and possible land use changes, only 30 new affordable units and 12 new ADUs could be anticipated per year, when according to the housing plan, 4,000 units are needed. We hope that consultants and council members will look at more details related to the map, taking into account city topography, its watersheds, locations of resources like shopping, office facilities, and schools that could be walkable. We want to remind council members that the future land use map is only one of many tools available to help mitigate the affordable housing crisis. The Affordable Housing Plan outlines many other strategies outside of the land use plan that should move ahead while work on the land use map continues. And then finally, while it's true the land use map is the vision for zoning ordinances versus a binding legal document, the map will guide the zoning process and has the potential to provide legal arguments for rezoning. We will continue to participate in this process and keep you updated with additional comments and concerns. And we thank you so much for your service and hard work.
Thank you.
Mayor Walker, our last speaker will be Andrew Shelton. Emily Yen did have her hand raised, but she spoke previously, so I did lower her hand. Andrew, you're on with council. You've got 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to thank you all very much for your decisive action when it came to the statues last weekend, and we all appreciate that. I also wanted to make a brief comment on the ongoing housing issues in our town. I've lived in an apartment here for many years now, and have lived here previously for quite a long time. And ultimately, I would just like to ask y'all to, we need more housing. There are a lot of people that are bringing up issues about affordable housing using language that I feel is being appropriated to cover their actual mission of maintaining their ongoing neighborhood character. And I would like to say that we see that and recognize what they're doing, and we need more housing. Thank you.
Mayor Walker, we can't hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. And next, councilors, any comments? I have some, but I'll wait.
Just briefly, one, Ms. Carpenter had raised the issue of the need for additional or our ARP application tonight will also include over $800,000 moratoriums ending and state money available. I know there's going to be over, I think, 450. There as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? So I agree with the collective bargaining piece. I also hope that we can be an agency where unions are not the only way that staff members are getting their need met. And I think if we reach that goal, then we won't there won't be such a need for the collective bargaining. But since there is, definitely want to take a look at that. I also think that we need to keep in mind as a council what that means for a lot of the funding allocations that we keep voting on that'll come up in a couple of years, like the school bus drivers. There were 2, I think, additional positions in that. The fire department, we will have to support those new firefighters in a couple of years. The schools are supporting what we voted on tonight for 2 years. After that, that will become a budget item for them. We have the $4.5 million already that we'll have to figure out a way to support. And at some point, those things are going to compete with people who are not going to be able to join unions. The people in housing that we're talking about now that won't be able to advocate for themselves in the same way. And just want to make sure that we are considering all of those things holistically every time we vote. I do think that Mr. Shelton made a point that has been resonating with me for a while about appropriating language that some people are using to maintain the neighborhoods as they currently are. It's been really interesting, and I've just been reading and not commenting a lot on the future land use map. But it seems to be that there is, sort of an understanding that if it does pass as is, then developers will probably build for themselves. And we know unless someone has to do something different, the conversations that we've had over the past 3.5 years will lead to them doing things that are associated with bottom line revenue, ROI, things like that. And so we know what we're doing isn't working. And I feel that we need to make sure that when we are advocating for change or even the clarity in who we're talking about when we talk about affordable, that I think it would be helpful for me, for some of those same individuals, hundreds and thousands of individuals, to also understand that when they are silent, what that does. Someone mentioned 10th and Page. Of course, my mind immediately goes to what is happening with Monticello Dairy. Some of the same people who are supporting changes to the future land use map, who have also been participants over the years in advocating on their nonprofits' behalf or whatever, are also the same people that stay silent when a development like Monticello Dairy is built. And you can't you can't decide when you are going to be pro affordable housing and then when you support developments that are against it just based on relationships. And that's been a consistent theme the entire time that I've been here, that some people remain silent when they shouldn't, even when it's in direct conflict with the work they do. And it's almost as if people understand that developers, unless they have to, will probably do the same thing. And the concern is about building in the neighborhoods, because truly, even with where we are at today, if the ownership of the land or the dollars that will be invested in creating these affordable units don't happen, then there probably won't be any new development that benefits the lower income citizens. Pushing lower income citizens outside of an urban ring or in the city limits is the same cycle that happens based on where white people traditionally decide they want to live, whether it's in suburban areas or urban areas. So we are following that same trend now, and a lot of the comments are aligned with that. And it's all driven by who has the most access to what resources. And that's not a conversation that we're having as we have the conversation about what is affordable, where should density be, if it should be, what will guide ultimately the zoning rewrite that we will do later. And it would seem to me to be more authentic if we were having all of those conversations and not just part of it. So it does seem to be used just because when it's convenient to use racism and the language of it without it ever benefiting the people. And hopefully we can change that. Any other comments? No. All right. Okay, so we're at break. And so we will be back at 8:17.
And Mayor Walker, I'd like to encourage everyone on the city
Mr.
staff.
Willer, you're muted again.
Can you hear me?
It's good now.
If you can hear me. I just want to encourage everyone to reboot their computers during the break. It looks like IT is pushing out some updates, and we want to make sure everyone does that before we restart, if you have a PC. Thank you. David, if I got audio overhead? Okay, we have a temporary laptop in place. Sorry for the delay. We're ready to go.
All right, thank you. That was some great music while we were waiting, so I think that should have kept everybody satisfied during the break. All right, so we're up. We have our first action item. It's a resolution approving the request to pursue transportation alternative project grant funding through the Virginia Department of Transportation for one, design and construction of the Meadow Creek Valley Trail Bridge at $675,000, and two, safe routes to school program coordinator at $200,000. It's one reading. I'll invite staff to participate.
This is Chris Gensick with the Parks Department. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm on my phone. My laptop's still rebooting updates. This item is for a grant program that we use many, many times over the years. This is the Virginia Department of Transportation's Alternative Transportation Program grants. They require a council resolution, which is why we're here in front of you tonight. We decided to do two grants in one resolution this evening. I think they're separate resolutions. It's one action item. The grant the Parks Department is pursuing is to construct a long-awaited portion of ADA accessible trail along the Meadow Creek Valley from the Mickey Drive area up to the Virginia Institute of Autism at Greenbrier Drive, and also around the corner to Greenbrier Park. As you see in your notes, the Parks Department will use its existing trails CIP allocation of $135,000, and then the federal government matches through VDOT to bring in a total of $675,000. That's on top of about $375,000 we already have for this particular project. Costs have gone up over the years, and so we've determined that we're going to need this extra money for that particular project in Meadow Creek. I could take questions on the Meadow Creek one now, or Amanda Ponce can present for the safe routes piece, whichever way you'd like to do it.
Councilors, are there any questions on the Meadow Creek Valley Trail? No. All right.
Okay.
You can go to Amanda.
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. Good evening, counselors. My name is Amanda Ponce, and I'm the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator in the Department of Public Works. We've been running a Safe Routes to School program for the last 5 years in partnership with the Virginia Department of Transportation and the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure grant program. Safe Routes to School programs help schools and communities make walking and biking to school a safe and convenient natural activity. This year, VDOT announced that the grant funding would be changing and future non-infrastructure grants would be funded through the Transportation Alternatives Program that Chris described. And so we're hoping to apply for up to $200,000 that would fund a full-time coordinator and associated programming for 2 years starting in 2022. So this grant application would continue the already established programming that we have in K-8 schools citywide. These activities include things like bike and walk to school day events, helmet giveaways, neighborhood bike repair in some of our public housing areas, student travel tallies, and a website and social media presence. So we hope that you'll support our desire to submit a grant application for this program and hope you will approve this resolution. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Would the neighborhood bike repair go to people where they're at?
Yes, that is the intent. So the Safe Routes to School program will be pairing up with community bikes and sort of traveling neighborhood to neighborhood to help with that.
What is the time frame by which we know if these grants will have been appropriated from the programs which we're seeking?
Yeah, well, for Safe Routes to School, well, for both of these, the funding would become available in 2022. I mean, I know that, you know, I don't know the exact funding. We'll know of the award next year, and at that time they'll kind of give us a sense of when that funding will be available. But we're anticipating, at least for the Safe Routes grant, that it would be available in the fall of 2022.
And would that mean that you have a gap in that programming this coming year because of the expiration of the other grant that was coming from the infrastructure grant?
Right. So we were awarded that grant, and we'll be coming to you with an appropriation in the next couple of weeks. But we will have the program continue through next year, but it will not be at the same. Well, we're hoping it will be at the same level, although the funding that we were awarded was less than we had received in past years.
I don't have any other questions.
Any other questions? So this position for the Safe Routes to School, you would be adding another employee or supporting the current employee?
This would support a current employee.
Okay.
Allow him to continue his position.
Okay, so the gap in funding supports so that employee is still supported?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Like I said, we'll be coming to you at a later time, probably August, September, probably September timeframe with an appropriation for next year's, the 2021-2022 year.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? No. All right. Is there a motion?
I move we adopt the resolution authorizing application for transportation alternatives funding for a Meadow Creek Valley Trail Bridge and for the Safe Routes to School program and coordinator.
Second.
Any further questions? Nope. All right. Thomas?
Mayor Walker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGill?
Yes.
Councillor Hill?
Yes.
Councillor Payne?
Yes.
Councillor Snook?
Yes.
All right. That carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a resolution. Oh, thank you. Next up, we have a resolution appropriating funds for funding transfer for the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund, program review, redesign, and inclusionary zoning program design. It's a $165,000 request, and this is the first of two readings.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and the City Manager. This is Alex Ikefuna from NDS. This request is essentially a fund transfer to enable staff to complete a couple of related project design to implement the affordable housing plan that was endorsed by the City Council a couple of months ago. Staff is asking for fund transfer for this particular purpose. The fund has already been appropriated, and council action will essentially transfer these funds from CDBG admin funds and 2022 CIP affordable housing CIP fund. The project that's been undertaken is essentially twofold. One is to review the affordable housing program, its performance, past performances dating back to 10 years from today. The program is designed to evaluate whether the city's investment is actually producing a desired outcome. The project will be looking at the agreements, selection process, contracting process, development of new approaches as needed, grant terms, and the program criteria. Additionally, a matrix will be developed so the city will be able to evaluate the program effectively going into the future. The other component is inclusionary zoning design. When the current contract for affordable for comprehensive plan update was signed, it did not include the inclusionary zoning program design, and staff is looking at working with the consultants to take a look at this. The completion of this study will provide a tool for the implementation of affordable housing chapter of the comprehensive plan. It's going to look at zoning incentives like bonus density or density bonus rather, tax abatement, parking requirements, and the streamlining of the development review process. So we are hoping that once done, we'll have additional item in the toolkit for implementing affordable housing program. There are several benefits to these two items, and in terms of affordable housing implementation, we provide a more inclusive development feasibility in terms of exaction. The request complies with the provisions of 2018 to 2020 strategic plan and also council's mission statement. So with council action tonight, we'll be authorizing transfer of these funds from appropriate, already appropriated funds to enable the completion of this project. With that in mind, I'll entertain questions from the City Council.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions?
I have a couple of questions. First of all, we have heard in the last few months a series of complaints from people who are upset with the way that the process has been working for the land use map and so on. And they're saying, well, have the consultants done a study of induced demand or of various other econometric kinds of calculations? Is any of that contemplated here?
The inclusionary zoning is going to include some calculations, you know, about thresholds for for multi-family development and density bonuses, and then a designation of affordable housing out of those. So that's going to be, that calculation will be included in the inclusionary zoning program.
So I guess I understand the part about wanting to do the evaluation of past efforts, the program review, and the redesign. I guess I'm wondering, what exactly do we expect to get out of the redesign?
Right now, in terms of redesigning the program, it will enable a more efficient use of the city's resources. It's going to look at the agreement. Right now, the agreements we have, if you look at it, from the agreement I've been used to, it just doesn't have enough teeth in it. It's not performance-based. The selection process and contracting services needs to be revamped. The terms of the contract and the criteria for evaluation. And finally, we need a metrics, how we are going to evaluate the program in the future. So that's what we are going to get out of this. Right now, program we have is not efficient in terms of investment of the city's resources. We need to have a very good inventory system, accountability, which is lacking at this time, and some kind of performance-based measurement program going into the future.
I guess the other question is, do we have any idea how long it'll take them to do it?
Yeah, I think they're looking at probably within 6 months to get it done. And the inclusionary zoning, they need to make a substantial progress because it's going to inform the development of certain pieces of the zoning rewrite, because it's going to deal with some calibrations, thresholds, in terms of multi-family development and things like that. So we are looking at accelerated studies in terms of getting things done.
I guess I'm a little surprised that this would not already have been thought of as being included within the zoning rewrite that it's part of the $975,000 contract we've already got with these folks. But if it's not, it certainly should be. And if it's not, we should definitely be adding it to the mix.
Thank you.
Just a couple questions. One, I know we've heard in recent weeks the proposal for an affordable housing overlay. Is there any expectation that the money allocated for developing this inclusionary zoning program could be used to develop that affordable housing overlay program if that's a direction we decide to go in, or would that be a completely separate thing?
It's a separate thing. And let me just say about that overlay. It was presented to the Planning Commission. Staff and the consultant also met with the proponents of the or representatives of HAC, Mr. Rosenwig and Sunshine Merton of PHA. We went through the process, the proposal, and Planning Commission also reviewed it and then asked the consultant to evaluate that proposal and then see whether there are some of the provisions that are practical in terms of application that can be integrated into the future land use. So the consultant will be doing that. I don't think there is additional funding that will be necessary to do that. I think it will be part of public comments. That's what that is, So the consultant is going to be looking at that overlay proposal to see whether there are parts of it as directed by the Planning Commission that can be integrated into the future land use map. Having said that, I just want to point out something, just food for thought for the City Council in terms of that overlay. Everything that comes out from the future land use map and perhaps the zoning ordinance and maybe portions of the overlay that will be integrated into the future land use plan map has to be what the market can respond to. We have to be cognizant of that because we may come up with something that the market will not respond to, and then the developers, private developers, may not like to respond to that. So we have to take that in mind. We also discussed this particular issue with the consultant and representatives from MAC. So to answer your question again, as directed by Planning Commission, the consultant will be looking at that overlay proposal to see what can be integrated into the future land use map. And I don't think that would require additional funding to do that.
And then is it still the expectation in terms of timeline, the inclusionary zoning program would coincide with any changes to our zoning map rather than follow afterwards before any zoning changes are made?
It will coincide because once council, this is 2 readings. It requires 2 readings. So the next reading, I think, if council decides to move it forward, will be August 2nd, I believe. And the consultant is gearing to kick this off. Once that second reading is done, the housing consultant and the land use RHI, they will be talking to each other right away, in terms of staging the project, because the recommendations or outcome of the inclusionary zoning program design, is going to inform a whole lot of aspects of the zoning rewrite.
And final question is the allocation for the CAF aspect of this. Is that is it accurate that that's basically this will allow us to fulfill the governance section of our adopted affordable housing plan as it relates to the CAF in terms of providing the full documentation of affordable units, how long they're actually staying affordable, as well as the other changes that our adopted affordable housing plan specifically called for?
Yeah, essentially part of the administration of the CAF, that's performance, investments, outcome-based, and things like that. And the processes associated with it, including the agreement itself. That's what is going to help to accomplish.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And my questions were just asked and answered. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Any other?
I will just say that as during my time on the Housing Advisory Committee and sitting in on some of the allocation discussions, I just think this is really long overdue. I know that the mayor and I have discussed this throughout our time on council, and just making sure that we have a process in place that does have that accountability, but also just looking back historically and understanding what has and has not been working, so that we can be have the most effective use of city dollars moving forward. So I'm glad to see this coming to fruition. And also just getting to the question that was asked and answered around just that the timing of some of these things is coinciding with all the other efforts that are underway, so that at the end of this, we're feeling like we've done a fully comprehensive assessment of all the angles that we can take to come through on our affordable housing plan. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
So I have a lot of comments, but I will let what has been said be the comments. I just think like Heather said, this is something we just want done, and we've been talking about. So grateful for that finally. And my only other question would be if we could speed this up by a week, if that's helpful, if we want this for our second vote on the 27th. So that's my only question there, if that's a possibility.
Mayor, I think that's up to council. You'll be in a regular public meeting and can vote on it.
Is everybody okay with that?
Seems fine to me.
As long as it doesn't put any pressure on staff, I'm fine with that. And as long as it stays within timelines for public notification and that hasn't gone out yet.
We can do it.
All right, sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank you, Council. And Mayor?
Next up, we have resolution approving the findings of the design public hearing for the Fontaine Avenue streetscape. And this is one reading. Hello.
Good evening, Mayor Walker, members of council. I'm Kyle Kling. I'm a transportation project manager with the Department of Public Works Engineering Division, and I'm the city's project manager for the Fontaine Avenue project. I'll be joined this evening by members of our design consultant team, Amy Sandberg and Owen Peary. They're with RK&K Engineering. As you just mentioned, we're here this evening seeking a resolution approving the findings of the project's design public hearing, which was held back in early May of this year. As some of you may recall, in January of 2020, Council accepted the Planning Commission's recommendation that this project's conceptual design was found to be in accordance with the city's comprehensive plan. Over the past year and a half or so, the design team has worked diligently to move the project from that conceptual design phase and into and through the preliminary engineering and design phase. That finalized with a design public hearing on May 12th of 2021, where the preliminary design was presented to members of the public, and those individuals who were in attendance had an opportunity to solicit and provide feedback on the design. With that being said, I'll pass things off now to Amy and Owen with RK&K to provide some more detail on what that preliminary design looks like and to discuss some of the findings of our public hearing.
Thanks, Kyle. I'll kick it off. Brian, if you could sort of just roll with me here. First, the agenda. We're just going to give you a brief overview of the project and where we've been since we last saw you. A little bit of a project update, show you some of the public hearing displays that we showed the public and the feedback we got and some of the recommendations or a couple recommendations we have for you this evening to help us move forward. Go ahead. First, we'll give a review of the project, including goals, budget, schedule, and meetings attended. The Fontaine Streetscape project has identified 4 key project goals, which have not changed since the last City Council meeting in January 2020. In line with the City of Charlottesville's overall transportation goals, the project seeks to make Fontaine Avenue a complete street, which improves accommodations for all users, ensuring safe passage for pedestrians and bicyclists, understanding that this serves as a gateway corridor into the city and ensuring the impression is attractive, and improving access to local facilities and ensuring these connections are also easily accessed by pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users. Project budget. Funding for this project was obtained through the VDOT program called Smart Scale, which provides funding for local projects throughout the state on a competitive basis. The Smart Scale application placed a high emphasis on safety and multimodal improvements, which ultimately lead to its selection and funding of $11,700,000 for the proposed improvements. Go ahead. The 60% plans for the project were submitted in the summer of 2020, and utility coordination has been ongoing with private utility owners. Right-of-way acquisition and utility relocations are scheduled to be completed by early 2023. Final designs will take place during the same time period, with 100% plans being completed by early 2023. The project is slated to be advertised and bid by contractors between the fall of 2022 and the spring of 2023, with construction starting immediately after that. Go ahead. Just to show you what we've been doing, sorry if Zoom chops off the bottom. You're down there where we are tonight, a little bit out of sight, but you can see the robust public meetings we've had, amount of public meetings to gather information and feedback from both committees and from the public, including we've had 2 open houses and several technical committee meetings, planning commission, place task force. Of course, your meeting we had with you in January, and now we're back here again this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to show you what we showed the public on design public hearing displays and some of the other graphics that just will help show you what this project's about.
Thanks, Owen. We can go on to the next slide, please.
Amy, can you get a little closer to the mic? I can barely hear you.
Okay, is that better?
Better.
The project area per the Smart Scale application is along Fontaine Avenue from the city limits to the Jefferson Park Avenue and Maury Avenue intersection. The project falls within the Jefferson Park Avenue neighborhood, with the Fry Springs neighborhood south of the railroad tracks. The Fontaine Research Park is on the western side of the site, the City of Charlottesville Fire Station within the central portion, and several local businesses on the eastern edge. Next slide, please. The image on the screen is a graphical rendering of the project site, and the following slides will show some close-up segments with associated renderings showing the improvements for the project. From the city limits to Summit Street, there is primarily residential housing with the University of Virginia property to the north. During this phase, we will make the transformation from bicycle accommodations within the street to dedicated bicycle lanes on both sides of the street. The sidewalks are improved on each side of the street by making the south side wider and adding a sidewalk to the north side. As you reach the Summit Street intersection, we have a protected intersection design. This shifts pedestrians and bicyclists away from turning traffic to promote safety for all users. At the intersection, we also have a new crosswalk for safe passage along Fontaine Avenue. This was highly desired during feedback we received throughout the outreach period. Next slide, please. The segment features sidewalks, landscape buffers, dedicated bicycle lanes with buffers, and vehicle traffic lanes. On the south side, which is shown on the right, there is a proposed retaining wall that will minimize impacts to the surrounding properties. These improvements are like those shown on other segments, as you'll see in the next few slides. The central portion of the project extends from the Summit Street intersection to Lewis Street. This corridor features the City of Charlottesville Fire Station, a gas station, and several residential properties that are both single-family homes and student apartments. This segment features as a similar concept to the first section and introduces a second protected intersection at Piedmont Avenue, which also features a dedicated crosswalk. The Summit Street to Lewis Street section is very similar to the first part of the project. One key difference in this section is that the trees on the north side, shown to the left, will be slightly smaller to accommodate the overhead power lines and communication lines along the street. All of the landscaping chosen will be per the City of Design's standards and will be specifically picked for success along this corridor. Next slide. On the eastern side of the project, there is a commercial section between Lewis Street and Jefferson Park and Maury Avenue. This section converts from the general concept shown thus far in the presentation to become more traditional. The bicycle lanes on the north side are shared lanes that become dedicated facilities just to the west of Lewis Street. On the south side, the bicycle lane remains, but it is not buffered. It is anticipated that the bicycle lane will be shown across the intersection to connect with the existing facilities to the east on Jefferson Park Avenue. The turning lanes existing today will remain in order to provide access to destinations to the north and the south. As shown in the plan view, this section varies from others within the corridor by removing the landscape and bicycle buffers and maintaining the existing turning lanes in the eastbound direction. And the next slide we have is a video rendering that we will show you of the corridor once the Fontaine streetscape improvements are implemented. Brian, if you can please click it. Thank you. Everything shown in this rendering is an artistic rendering and is not field conditions. All of the plantings, materials, and features shown along the corridor are subject to change. Note that as we move through the entrance corridor to the city, you saw the introduction of dedicated bicycle lanes, and there was the first protected intersection. There is enhanced landscaping along the street, and there is several bike lanes you're showing. There's the second protected intersection, and the bicycle lanes continue along the street as we move through the residential part of the corridor. And as we move here towards Lewis Street, you'll notice that the bike lanes start to transition down and become shared on the left side of the screen and become dedicated without a buffer on the right side of the screen. Next screen, please. And so now we will discuss the hearing feedback. The project had 5 responses to the online survey and received an additional 18 comments. Many of the comments supported safety for bicyclists, maintaining access along the corridor, and ensuring that the landscape selections are chosen to fit the context of the corridor. None of the comments received impacted the major design features of the project or the design intention. The feedback will be incorporated into the future 90% design plans. Anything that is incorporated is not anticipated to change the current right-of-way impact. The design team recommends the following for approval from the council. Approval of the major design features as shown at the design public hearing and requesting right-of-way authorization from VDOT to continue into the next phase of the project. And with that, we would like to thank you for listening and appreciate your interest in the Fontaine Streetscape project.
Thank you all for the presentation.
Yeah, we'd be happy to take any questions at this time as well, if there are any from members of council.
I have one about who's going to be selecting the species of plantings.
Yeah, so we'll work closely with urban forestry to come up with a planting palette for the corridor. I think as Amy indicated, the trees on the south side of the street are going to be understory trees just to avoid any conflicts with the power lines out there. But we'll use the planting palette that's already determined by urban forestry and coordinate with them as we move along throughout the design
I'm just
phase.
becoming more and more concerned with invasive species. And there's many times where we think what we're planting is perfectly fine. And then we come to find out a few years later, it's kind of growing out of control. And it would be really great if we could work as best we can to stay within native species.
Yeah, certainly. That's something we'll look into and you know, like I said, coordinate as we move forward.
I have a question about the potential, you all are trying to, it says reduce construction costs to fill some, I guess, gaps between the state and federal funding. If you could talk a little bit about that, just are we going to see any future requests? And I just want to talk about that based on just where we're at, if that's the case.
Yeah, sure. So based off of the last estimate that was provided, which was about 2 months ago, we're looking at around a $400,000 shortfall. That estimate did have a pretty conservative 20% contingency on it. So we're looking at about $1.4 million in contingency funding that's wrapped into that estimate. We weren't comfortable reducing that number just given, you know, how we've seen construction costs escalate during the pandemic. So it is possible you'll see an additional request for funding sometime down the line, but we will work over the next several months to try to cut costs where we can.
And one question I had, perhaps related to that, is I know in reading through some of the community feedback, there are a couple people who raised the question of why these aren't protected bike lanes with bollards or some kind of physical separation between the bike lane and the road where cars are. Oh, I know that's a problem that goes beyond just this specific project, but what is the reason for that? Is it cost? Is there some other design challenge that prevented that?
Yeah, great question, Michael. So the main reason is because of the fire station along the corridor there. We need to maintain access to those emergency vehicles, traveling up and down the corridor. We felt that if we were to put 11-foot travel lanes out there with some type of separated facility restricting access, it would make it more challenging for those vehicles to travel the corridor when needed. I think another aspect of that is it is a residential neighborhood, as Amy pointed out, a good majority of it is, and there's a ton of driveway cuts associated with that. So in order to have some type of separated or protected facility out there, we would have a lot of challenges incorporating that, just given the number of driveway cuts and how that grade would have to change every 20 or 30 feet to meet those entrances. So those are the two main reasons. Owen or Amy, if you guys want to expand on that a little bit, feel free to.
Yeah, Michael, that's a great question. And I will add, with the steering committee and with the internal technical committee that's made up by staff, we looked at tons of options. The fire station was a major one, driveways for sure. And I think it also, for special events and stadium events, not having those impediments in the roadway gives police and the people ushering people in and out of the city a few options they may not have otherwise. So all that was sort of put in the hopper with the pros and cons of having a buffered strip and having a protected strip. And we're trying to do the best we can without wrecking the fabric that the street has today and just making the footprint unbearably big.
Okay. Councilors, any other questions? No. All right. I'm trying to, I know there were some comments about UVA and their participation. I wonder, Chip, if it's worth exploring the contribution that was agreed upon for them to make on, I think, phase 4 of the West Main Street, that was negotiated a bit with the Brandon Avenue project. If maybe, since they have, there's a lot of traffic in that area due to, their work too, that maybe that could be transferred maybe. I think it's a conversation that is worth having.
We can certainly have that conversation. I think related to this project, if I'm not mistaken too, Albemarle County and VDOT have a project that's at the Fontaine and US 29 intersection that will adjoin this project that is very instrumental to the research park there. And it's certainly a three-way type of, actually 4, with the city, county, VDOT, and UVA that'll benefit from the improvements there. And we can certainly bring that up.
Okay. I think it would be helpful, just not knowing what the financial request will be. And we've also been getting some of the comments from like the Cherry Avenue neighborhood that this is going to, this is consistently coming up. And the conversations that we just had around affordability with like West Main Street, it would just be helpful to have that information to know what we can afford, and if we can transfer that commitment to, if that's something they would be open to, that should take care of the difference. Any other questions? All right, is there a motion?
I move we adopt the resolution approving the Fontaine Avenue Streetscape Project Design public hearing.
A second.
Ms. Thomas?
Mayor Walker,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGill,
Yes.
Councillor Hill,
Yes.
Councillor Payne,
Yes.
Councillor Snook,
Yes.
Thank you. That carries 5-0. Thank you all for the presentation, and hopefully we'll have an update sooner than later on the funding aspects of that. Just be helpful.
We'll keep you posted. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have a resolution appropriating funds from the American Rescue Plan for eligible local activities at $1,986,000. This is the second reading.
Thank you, Mayor Walker and Council. Since this is a second reading, I won't go into great detail on this, but you have your information packet. But for any of the new listeners that we have, as part of the American Rescue Plan that was signed into law in March of 2021, the city of Charlottesville will be the recipient of just over $19.5 million of the ARP funding. We've already received our first tranche of those funds, which was $9.8 million, and we expect to receive our second half in May of 2022 of another $9.8 million. While we're putting together a program to go out to our public partners and stakeholders and nonprofits that are providing community assistance, we have had some very immediate needs that we brought to you prior to putting that program together. Additionally, just as a reminder, a good portion of the first tranche of these funds will be to replenish the city's revenue that was lost during the pandemic. We're expecting that to be in the neighborhood of $7.3 million. But the emergency and immediate needs that we have identified are in the areas of housing assistance for rental housing mitigation, for helping to pay other household expenses to families that have lost jobs and other reasons for financial distress due to COVID, as well as eviction mitigation, working to try to have a legal and counseling assistance program in place to help prevent evictions when they do begin again at the end of this month. In addition to that, we also have some immediate needs in the areas of economic development, trying to provide support to some of the smaller businesses that have been hurt during the pandemic. And then finally, in trying to open up City Hall in the first week of September, is making some safety improvements in the lobby areas where people will congregate, where we can provide better access and safe access as citizens begin to use City Hall again. The total of this request is $1,986,100. After the first reading, Council asked for more specifics on each one of the programs, which we've provided to you in your packet. And we have several of our department heads that are overseeing these funds that are here to answer any questions that you may have. With that, we would be glad to answer questions.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions?
Just one, which is, I know it had been mentioned Albemarle County was possibly pursuing funding their own portion to try to provide right to counsel in eviction cases. Do we know if that's something that Albemarle County is pursuing, or is that just something we don't know at this point? They're still deliberating that.
CACI may have a more up-to-date. My understanding is they are still pursuing that, but they have not taken a vote on it yet.
Okay, thank you.
Do we know when they are taking the vote?
I do not.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? No? All right. Is there a motion?
Let me find it. Oh, sorry. I move we adopt a resolution appropriating funding for the American Rescue Plan for eligible local activities in the amount of $1,986,100.
Second the motion.
Any further discussion? All right. Ms. Thomas?
Mayor Walker,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGill,
Yes.
Councillor Hill,
Yes.
Councillor Payne,
Yes.
Councillor Snook,
Yes.
All right, thank you. That carries 5-0. All right.
Really quick. Sorry. Just kind of related to this before we jump. So I know we just kind of stepped through Mr. Boyle's like where the kind of allocation of funding is with revenue replacement. But we are continuing to get questions around when and what flexibility we may have for these dollars, even if it's through the revenue replacement route for other initiatives. And I guess for the public awareness, like what are our thoughts on how we might be approaching that over the next 6 to 12 months?
Sure, be happy to. Getting feedback. We will still receive, and anyone who has what they believe is a direct COVID-related emergency need, similar to rent relief and other things, they're more than welcome to send me a request information. I will work with our different departments according to where it may be and help to determine if it is in fact something that's of an immediate and emergency importance to us. And we have that opportunity to come to council just like we did with these programs. The other is that as we get closer, June 30th, of course, was the end of our fiscal year. As we get closer to November, when our audit will be completed, we'll have a better idea of what that lost revenue actually is, so that we then would know what the balance we have of the $9.8 million we've already received minus what we have allotted through tonight will be available. We will have a program in place so that we can take applications from the public as well as our departments who have their own departmental request in, and come to council with that sometime in the early fall. We don't intend to try to appropriate or allot the full $19 million. We want to wait on the second tranche until we know for certain that we are getting that. Congress can always come back and undo what they did. So we don't want to make commitments for the second round until that's actually in our hands, but then use the same program to put that money into the community. The other thing is that there are still so many variables and unknowns. We don't know if there will be a resurgence of COVID in the future. And so there may be additional needs or other needs in a year from now that we just can't contemplate right now. But for the immediate future, we plan to have a program in place early this fall when it's more definitive of what our available funding will be. But if someone does have what they believe is an immediate need, they can certainly contact us and we can help them figure out how immediate that is.
Okay, that was going to be my comment. Sorry for that.
That's okay.
Thank you, Chip.
Thank you. I had a thought. I needed that laugh. Oh, the allocation and the resurgence of COVID is looking very likely that because of the restrictions being removed, that other places, localities are having a resurgence and having to return to the mask and distancing physical distancing requirements. So it's likely that if we stay on pace to where we are now, that this fall is not going to be very pleasant. And so that means the federal government will probably have to continue allocating at some point, but whether they do or not, I just hope we prioritize families that will not be able to bounce back in the same way that even our local government will be able to. And so I just want to make sure that we, there's not a lot of evidence based on direct payments to families because people don't want to give people direct payments. But we all know, and people who have family members that have been able to support them, normally when you listen to stories, there was even a business owner on a call back in whatever winter, a couple months ago, fall, that talked about, starting his business based on the money from, his mother's, I think he said, passing. And so we all know that those type of deposits into someone's life can really alter the trajectory. And so I hope that we understand as a government just the value of making sure that families' needs are met and they're not having to go through a whole lot of hoops to get the support that they need.
And Mayor, also along those lines, we're watching very closely what the state will be doing with the ARP money that they're receiving. The General Assembly doesn't go back into session until August to begin to allot those funds. Any funds that we have needs for that can be paid for with state funds then allows us more flexibility with our local funds for exactly what you're talking about. Because the state will stay with most of the more basic programs like rent relief and business assistance. So the more we can rely on the state, the more flexibility we'll have with our local funds.
And they also had, what was it, a $2 billion surplus?
Yes.
Yeah, and hopefully that'll be utilized in some way that'll be helpful. All right. All right, any additional comments?
Are we at the part where I can ask Chip about something for next time?
No, we have one more thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, just that we are almost there. Okay. So general business, we have a report, the Rivanna Authority's quarterly report. It's a written report only because they do an in-person annual report. Are there any comments, counselors, from the report? No questions? No questions. All right. Moving on, now we're at other business and questions for city manager follow-up. So are there any other business items for consideration or questions that counselors have for the city manager?
I just had a question because we've gotten several inquiries about this and coming from different angles about just the role the city does or does not play in the Greyhound bus station's decision to no longer have. So I know you don't have to answer it now, Chip, but I just know this is coming up and I just want to acknowledge to the public that we're hearing the frustrations. I think this is this is not within our purview, but the most recent comment that came today was around the role our own our own bus station could play in that as a housing place for those stops. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there as something that we recognize that the community is interested in, but if you want to clarify anything now, but otherwise we'll just wait to hear from you in the future.
I can say, and Mr. Williams is, I think, still with us. But yes, we're very concerned about it too for a number of reasons. Certainly for our citizen services. A lot of our citizens utilize Greyhound to travel. We are very limited in what we can do because it is a private carrier and a private service. We have received a request of if there were any way to provide some type of shelter where the current travelers are waiting for the bus, but it's all privately owned property. And our understanding when we inquired is that both parcels of land that is adjacent to where the bus is parking is for sale and has offers on that property. So the property owners, would not be allowing any type of use of that right now. We would love to talk with Greyhound. I know that they have inquired, but the last that we heard, they were just looking for somebody to take over the service, which would be the ticket sales and everything else that were involved with that, which is beyond what we would do with our public transit. But with that, that's about all that I could help with at this point, but we're certainly would love to continue that conversation to see. We believe that there are some other locations that are close by that Greyhound would be very well suited for, but they're also on private property and would have to be negotiated with the private property owners.
Thank you.
I can say too that it's our understanding from some news articles that Greyhound has actually stopped service in other similar peer markets within Virginia just recently.
Okay, thank you. Councilors, any other questions or any other business? No? All right. So we're at matters by the public. I'll turn it over to Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mayor Walker. We have 17 people in the audience right now. If you'd like to address council, please click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar. If you're on via telephone, you can press *9. First up is Robin Hoffman. Robin, you're on with council. You've got 3 minutes.
Yes, I want to say two things. One thing is quickly, I've actually tried to organize a bunch of people from various parts of our community, artists plus the senior center, to do drawings of the parks and to try to develop voluntarily some ideas about what could be in the parks. But then secondly, I want to say Yancey School has telemedicine for mental health and different things. And also H1N1, myself and the health department just went to the schools and lined everybody up. This politicizing of the COVID is so stupid. We need to just do that. We need to just set up lines at the schools and have everybody just line up. And that's something we've done in the past and it worked really effectively. We've even gone to different offices, as a group of nurses and pharmacists and things. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone else would like to address council, please click the raise hand icon.
All right. Doesn't look like it. Well, thank you all for attending tonight and meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.